Hey, what's up guys? My name is Dr. Antonio with Loud Chiropractic and Coaching here in Lafayette, Colorado, okay? Today, what we're gonna be going over is 5 of the top tips that we give to help our patients and our clients with deadlifting. Now, this is an associated video with the podcast episode that we did. It's the exact same information that we did in the podcast. The podcast will be diving a little bit more in detail of the nuances explaining these, but we're gonna dive into that same content right now, but we just wanted to demonstrate what those tips are so that you can see it in live action to give you a little bit more of a frame of a reference. Now, how can you apply this view? When earlier on when I was starting weightlifting or learning a new methodology, whether it be kettlebells or something like that, the thing that I did constantly was film myself. I would film myself and then I would cross-reference it with other YouTube videos of professionals or other coaches, so on and so forth, and I can see side by side some of the technique flaws that might be going on, and then layer in some of the content that I'm hearing, some of the information from books that I was reading. So I implore you to do the same. If you don't have a coach looking at you and you're trying to go through a self-developmental process, or you're just trying to understand your body a little bit more, that is a fantastic way to understand what's going on. So these 5 topics, we're going to dive into them one by one and explain in as much detail as we can to keep this video concise why this is important. So the first one is the bar or the weight or the task is too far in front of you. So if I turn this barbell sideways, what we mean is so now you can see along the side here. So as I set this up, right? Now, I know you can't see maybe my shin or my feet because of this plate here, but you'll see here in a moment what we're talking about. So right now, my shins are right up against the bar. So you can see how close that weight is to me. So as I grab this, I can keep that bar path nice and straight as I go up and down, hinging to do the movement. Now, if I did this exact same thing, but I'm standing out here, you can see how much further that bar gets away from me, and I can feel how much more load and stress is being put on my back as a result of that. Now, the same also goes true if we're just talking about like a kettlebell. Oftentimes we see, and this is great, we prescribe sumo deadlifts or kettlebell deadlifts all the time, but what we instruct is for people to straddle or stand directly over the kettlebell, okay? Now, why? Is because it keeps that weight nice and close to you, and it allows you to sit back into your heels to make sure we're loading that posterior chain. But same thing, if I'm forward here where that kettlebell's in front of my toes, I'm gonna be putting potentially a lot more strain on that lower back because I've increased the distance from the kettlebell to the actual lever moment arm, which would be essentially my hips, right? So as I'm reaching forward, that's gonna put more strain on here. Now, you can still maintain a neutral spine, a long spine, or a straight back, but just simply the act of having it out in front of you, even though my back's straight, this is having to work that much harder. So we wanna make sure we're keeping the weight, the box, whatever that is, closer to us, okay? Now, the second point that we want to make is pulling too fast. So we're going to do the same. Actually, I'm just going to get this out of the way so you guys can see a better frontal view here. So I'm going to turn, pulling the bar too fast. So what that means is my shoulders are connected to my arms, my hands connect to the barbell. The work is basically being done from here to pull my upper body up, which is effectively going to pull my arms up. So what can happen is if I'm here and I just start yanking too fast, right? If I'm here, yank, I'm rising too fast. I'm trying to jerk that bar up to be explosive because you want to move the weight, all fine and good. But what can happen from a side view, if you see that same speed happen, good setup, too fast, you see that rounding of the back. We're effectively not keeping all that pre-tension that you've built up. And what happens is you want to yank really fast and the spine will just kind of end up rounding off sometimes because your body's trying to move too fast and you're not maintaining the tension. And we'll get into wedging and tension here in a moment, okay? So that's another common fault that we see. We just want to be able to make sure that when we're rising up, the whole unit and the whole system is rising up together at the same speed and we're not getting that really fast jerking motion, okay? Now the next tip, or the next fix that you wanna think about, is not letting your hips rise too fast as well. So the same goes true. So the analogy that I was giving on the podcast, which I'm gonna describe here, and you'll see it in the full body sequence here in a moment. Imagine my elbow is my hips, this is my torso, and this is my shoulder. So in this setup, which is a hinge, it's perfectly fine for your torso to be horizontal to the ground. You might be here, but essentially what's happening is those hips are gonna move forward, and that the torso is gonna rise and the shoulders are gonna rise, right? So what happens sometimes is we'll set up and then we'll start to lift and the hips will come up because you're trying to pre-tension the hamstrings more, and then that'll happen. So you end up getting this kind of like 1-2 effect, which is same for the shoulders rising too fast, 1-2, right? And we want collectively for everything to be moving together. So what we're talking about is essentially this. We get a good setup, but based on maybe being a little bit too squatty or low, what's gonna happen is once I wanna start lifting, you're gonna see this and then that. So one more time. Tension, oh, right? You see that kind of 1-2 jerky motion? And it could be subtle like this, where it's still, I'm maintaining a neutral spine, but I'm shifting hips first and then the rest is coming. Now, the reason why most people are doing that is because we did not pre-tension that posterior chain, the hamstrings and the glutes enough. And so your body's trying to find that tension before you lift. It's trying to store up that elastic energy to help you initiate the movement before the concentric motion of the muscles takes place. So ideally, what you'd want to try to do is find that hip position that makes you feel like you're under that initial tension, right? So you're going to also hear what that sounds like as I pull into that bar. You hear like a little click. So I'm going to do that, drop, and then I might shift up a little bit. Now I'm ready. Now I can go. So it's fine to start low and then raise the hips a little bit, right? You see that? That's that pre-tension. Then I go, but the whole system just moved as one unit rather than starting and going boom, boom, okay? So moving together, not letting your hips rise too fast. Now, next topic is going to be, what do we do with this, right? We hear brace, tighten abs. There's a number of different cues that people will give when lifting to clients or coaches, whatever that is, right? We're going to help kind of put this all together for it to make sense for you. So we think of, and I'm going to start with the basis first so that this kind of puts together and tells the story, right? So imagine this same analogy here, right? In order for the shoulders to effectively rise as the hips come through and forward, this cannot be soft, right? Notice, obviously my forearm is one piece, so that makes sense, but that's essentially what we're trying to do. I'm trying to turn my torso into one piece so that the force transfer that my legs is doing as my hips are driving forward will adequately raise my chest, raise my shoulders, raise my arms, and raise the weight. If we're soft and we have a soft system, then as you come up, you're going to see this happen. You're going to be dispersing energy all over the place and not being as effective and efficient. And this could potentially lead to some back pain or an injury, right? So we want to make sure that mid system is stiffened so that you can transfer all that force that your legs are generating to your shoulders, arms, weight, so on and so forth. So what do we need to do? We need to stiffen this, okay? Imagine, so if we look at the torso from my shoulders, ball and socket joints to ball and socket joints, hips, this is essentially my torso all the way down to the pelvis and lower abs, okay? As I'm hinging, right, if you can see my torso here from the shoulders to the hips, it stays as a unit when you hinge, right? The shape and the angle, or the shape and the curvature of my spine should be the same here as it is here. We're trying to maintain that. And as the load increases, you have to stiffen the abdominal wall and torso all the way around to ensure that you're keeping that together. So We can do that by increasing your intra-abdominal pressure. So for some people, they'll take a big breath of air in, increase the air, and then hold it. That'll help stiffen you. For some, that might be too much for what you're doing. Again, you have to apply the amount of bracing and stiffening for the task at hand. This is 135, obviously light load for me. I don't need to brace and stiff that hard. If you're overcommitting, that's just not useful for you. But as you get heavier, you're going to need to brace and stiff more because the load is going to really challenge your positioning on that torso. So if you think about this, right, another way to think about it, McGill has a lot of these cues. If you stick your fingers into kind of that midsection between your ribs and your pelvis, and you go, huh, huh, or pretend like you're blowing out a candle, you're going to see it kind of expand, right? While I'm not pushing my belly out, that little poof, poof, stiffens us, and as the muscles contract and stiffen, you get a little bit of an expansion of the abdominal wall. Now, you should also feel that in the back. So if I go like, I call this like Wonder Woman or Superman pose, right? So in that space right there. So even my thumb's here. If I go, you'll see the thumb move a little bit, right? On the front, right? That little stiffening, that's gonna stiffen this and make this a more solid system. I'm trying to turn this whole torso section into this so that when I move and pull, this is tighter, and it's gonna be less likely that it's gonna buckle or collapse. Okay, so that's what stiffening or expanding the torso looks like. And again, you ramp it up based on needs. Now, for someone who's recovering an injury, who's feeling vulnerable in certain hinging or squatting positions, we're going to actually enhance that stiffening because it's going to provide more stability and more comfort. That allows us to keep moving and keep loading you and keep progressing while feeling more and more confident. And then it's gonna start to expand and bleed out from there, right? So this is a critical important component. It gets a little bit more detailed. Again, we could do a whole video and episode just on how the core functions and how everything's working together with the diaphragm, pelvic floor, so on and so forth. But from a basic standpoint, if you think about that kind of, we'll do it one more time here, that just blowing of the candles or grunting, or you're gonna see that just a little bit of pulsation due to that contraction, okay? Now, the last tip goes along with everything else before, talking about pre-tensioning and wedging, right? So for some, you're gonna see some people deadlifting, we're gonna start super high, and then you're gonna hear the barbell, I'm gonna stop talking, you're gonna hear the barbell click as I pull myself and wedge myself down into the position. So if I'm here, you're gonna hear, right? You hear that little click? That's me pulling the barbell into the little metal ring around the plate here. And what I'm trying to effectively do is pull myself down into the hole, which is basically like compressing a spring so that when I'm ready, it just releases, and that's gonna help me initiate the movement, and then all of the muscles involved in this movement are gonna go through its concentric phase to actually lift me up. Okay, so that's what we talk about kind of wedging in. Now, wedging in, we also wanna be effectively kind of activating, if you will, or turning on, or just priming the posterior chain. Posterior chain just basically means the backside. That's the system that's essentially most active in this deadlift movement. Now, what we will also be doing to some degree, if these are my feet, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be kind of wedging in. Now, when we're talking about wedging, so you can see my feet here. When I wedge, you see this little bit of this movement. Notice my feet aren't actually turning. So what I tell people is anchor your feet, screw into the ground without actually moving your feet, and you're gonna feel this kind of coil of tension, especially where the feet is, because there's that friction and resistance, but that's gonna coil up all the way through the posterior chain, turning on the glutes a little bit more, so on and so forth. So that's a essential component. Now, the other part, which goes on with layering with the core and everything else, is what are the hands are doing, right? So in this example, again, hips come forward, chest, torso rises, shoulders rise. We need a strong linkage between this, right, the torso and everything moving up, and this, which is connected to the weight. So we need this to be tightened and braced to ensure that this whole system is nice and connected so that we can effectively and efficiently do the task, lift the weight, so on and so forth. So what we're gonna do, let me grab this real quick, I meant to pull this out, is if you have a dowel, anything else to kind of just demonstrate this. So if I have this dowel here, this is my barbell, I am trying to snap this in half. So I'm trying to basically right here, just fold this in half. Now, as I do that, watch what happens to even my grip and my shoulders. You see that kind of, it's the same thing that we're talking about, screwing into the ground. I'm screwing into the bar, and that's gonna tighten my lats, which tighten to my shoulders, external rotators, and everything now is coiled through the bar, down through my back, down into my hips. So if effectively doing all of these things together, you're gonna very well pre-tension the whole system that is involved to initiate that initial kind of inertia and momentum stored in elastic energy as pre-tension, and then everything's gonna then take over from there. What happens oftentimes is the setup is done incorrectly, then you're having to grunt, you're trying to lift fast, you're trying to raise your hips fast, so on and so forth. So you can see how each one of these tips kind of coincide and overlap with each other to effectively make the movement done more effective and efficiently. Now, when we talk about effectiveness and efficiency, that's good because that allows you to lift more, right? If done well, you can lift more. And if done well, you also reduce the chances of overloading some of the more vulnerable places within a deadlift, which would effectively be your back and your lower back, right? So when we're talking about that pre-tension, you're not gonna be able to obviously see the feet move all that much, but if I'm setting up here, and this is true whether I'm doing a conventional or a modified sumo or a sumo, when I'm in this position here, what you're gonna essentially think about is almost like spreading your inner thighs away from each other. For modified sumo, which is where I pull for maximal leverage, is I'm basically just trying to open up and then my forearms just slide right down. So as I go down, I'm already screwing, and then I grab here, and then you'll see my elbows kind of turn towards you. I'm coiling all the way through, right? I'm pulling and I'm wedging. For me, based on my long legs, I don't get as much force production from here, so I have to once I pull down, I'll raise a little bit to get that tension built up, and then I'll snap and pop up. Okay, so putting it all together, a little bit of open, screw in, drop, and I'm gonna raise a little bit, so you'll see that just little raise, pop up. Okay, so from a side view, you can see it again. Set up. I'm gonna screw to open up my hips. Hands come, externally rotate. I'm gonna pull in and drop, raise a little bit, pow. Okay? So you have to pick and choose what you need. Most of us are lacking on, just a couple nuances with this. Is it gonna be the big difference between, a PR? Maybe not. But if it can help you be more effective and efficient, that's fantastic. If you're doing a boot camps, CrossFit, it's gonna allow you to do more work without getting as fatigued or under less time. And more importantly, it's helping you leverage the motion or the movement and maintain the shape appropriately to put you in less precarious positions, to hopefully reduce chances of injury, so on and so forth. So if you're doing deadlifts, hopefully this helps you. If you're not doing deadlifts, I encourage you to do deadlifts. It can be barbell, it can be kettlebells, it doesn't matter. I just want you picking some stuff off the ground. Make that posterior chain stronger. Make those postural muscles stronger. Make your hips stronger. Reduce load and share load between the joints to make your back pain better, to help heal back pain. It's efficient and it's effective for all of those things, and that's why everyone should be pulling from the ground and doing deadlifts. So once again, guys, my name is Dr. Antonio with Loud Chiropractic and Coaching. Thanks for tuning in. If this helped, drop a comment. If you found some other tools and things that have helped you, I'd love to hear what those are. Well, if you got a buddy who's always complaining about his back, when he's doing deadlifts or any type of pulling from the ground, please share this video with them. I know it'll be helpful for them. And until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Live loud.